It's almost the end of 3.7 as I'm uploading this video, and Cyrene is finally going to be going away, and also us getting introduced to 3.8. Since Cyrene has released, I have used her practically on every single half of every single mode multiple times, reset or not, main DPS, support, on Crisis Air teams, non-Crisis Air teams. I've had so much fun with this character. And today I'm here with my final impressions of Cyrene. We got a lot to talk about, so definitely strap in. Support the channel by clicking on my link in the description and start your Raid Shadow Legends journey. You'll get an awesome legendary champ Elenaro right at the start alongside 3 awesome epics. Don't miss out on this great head start and click the link right now. God, this unit has a history with the community especially, but frankly, it isn't a Starro unit without a lot of Doom posting, so we are getting past that era, or we have been past that era mainly. The ups and downs she has seen, people relegating her as barely an upgrade for Crisis Heirs, to ending up figuring out that she's just godlike for like quite literally every single one of them, honestly. Still having the memes of E2 Merchant because, well, besides the Remembrance team, she still kind of is with how insane that E2 is and how good it is for her performance. Anyway, enough about that. Let's just get on to my personal experiences. So I've used Cyrene at every single level. I've used her at E0S0, I've used her at E2S0, E2S1, and now mine, which for a little while now, E6S1. I've used her with practically like every single air combination. I've used so many weird ones, including Cerebra Hycelines. I've used proper but more unconventional ones such as Cypher Hycelines. Of course, ran the Remembrance team, Anox Hypercarry, Finon Hypercarry, Aglia, so on and so forth. I've used quite literally every single thing you can really think of when it comes to the air combinations, and I've also used her outside of it, and that's what we're mainly going to talk about. I mean, not mainly outside of it, everything. We're going to talk about everything. First, going over my E0S0 thoughts, of course. I mentioned this multiple times in my first impressions video, and it still hasn't changed. Looking at Cyrene outside of her Remembrance team at E0, or any level before E2 obviously, E2S1, E1S0, E0S1, E0S0, before that E2 dupe, if you really look at her as a character that will significantly buff your Crisis Air character, but not at a 0 cycle level, depending on how you're playing it, unless you're doing like an RMC plus Hyacine setup. Even at E0, this character is insane. Her being able to provide a Eidolon level buff to those characters is just really, really good. Some are better than others, like Finon's buff is alright, but if your Finon killed within the first ultimate, it's kind of worthless, as opposed to someone like Castris, who gets a significant jump in single target damage and even AoE damage. But nonetheless, all the characters' buffs are insane. Outside of the Remembrance team, obviously it still is a bit slow to charge her, but if you don't really care about that, you're completely fine with using a cycle, maybe 2, depending on what setup you're doing. To get her into ultimate, then there's no worry, because you get her into ultimate, and you're probably clearing within that cycle, because that's how strong the buff is. Plus, she gets access to true damage, and also some damage dealt, which is kind of whatever, but it is there. If you at least have her Lycone, that's some vulnerability plus crit damage as well. But yeah, across these teams, even dot setups, Anoxa, Finon, all these characters, she just works so good. Obviously, outside of it before E2, if you're not using her with Crisis Heirs, then yeah, really bad. But E0 with Crisis Heirs, not looking at a 0 cycle perspective, is just really strong. At a 0 cycle perspective, E0 outside of Remembrance teams, not really a big fan, but she still mainly would be a non-0 cycle unit using a cycle, maybe 2 to charge up, and then absolutely shredding. I do wish her damage, even with Ode to Ego, was better, because you really need the E1 to really see a benefit to her damage really contributing much. Outside of like, you know, having slower charge outside of it and then having lower sided damage, mainly the lower sided damage would be my complaint, especially if you're looking at it as, once again, a non-0 cycle perspective. Her buffs, otherwise, really, really good for these Crisis Heirs, which are the characters she is made for. And then, of course, talking a bit about the Remembrance team at E0, of course, on there, the charging issue, it's not a problem. You get it really quickly because you have Memo Sprites constantly acting, the Remembrance, they constantly can give stacks. Hyacine, especially, is like a supercharger for her at any level. Depending on the investment, even if you have E0 Cyrene, if you have something like E1S1 Evernight, and also maybe like E1 Hyacine, then Cyrene's damage even at E0 becomes really solid, thanks to how like the Memo Sprite stuff works. On that team, absolute insane unit, even at E0. I mean, she's an insane unit regardless, but on that team, like, there really just is no flaw. That's kind of how I do feel about her at a E0S0. Maybe even, like, honestly, you can consider E0S1. It doesn't really change my opinion because the Lycone isn't really that good. It gives her more speed, so it's easier to build, and then some extra crit damage vulnerability. Again, it really doesn't change how I feel about her at that level. And even later on, like, you really don't need to consider the Lycone just because it's not that great. Maybe that's something that could have been better, you know? Maybe I wish her Lycone was better. Great early investment dupe-wise, because the first one gives you access to a lot more damage, the second one like fixes like her only problem. Well, only problem, one of her two technical problems that I mentioned. But her light cone doesn't really do much besides make her easier to build, which there are workarounds already. But again, that's kind of how I feel for an E0S0 to E0S1 kind of, because again, doesn't really change my opinion. Cyrene. Now I'm going to group E1 and E2 together, because obviously talking about E1 would just be like, hey, she does good damage now. But yeah, E2, where you finally go into battle starting with a bunch of recollection stacks. Now, the only issue she had is really just solved. Any main air team combination where you're running her, again, the ones I mentioned, Phynon, Anoxa, whatever, she now gets her ultimate very quickly, even if you have maybe one or, yeah, just like one other character on the team that isn't a Crisis Air. Let's say you're running a sustainless Anoxa setup, you're running Anoxa, Cyrene, Ceridra. Let's say your last slot is Sunday or Bronya. Even if you're missing that initial startup that you still get to really get that ultimate like almost instantly, it's still fine. You get it like pretty fast anyways. The dupe you get at E2 and the level of jump you just get from getting her ultimate is just insane. You really just get this unit that practically has no flaw. Now she does good damage thanks to her E1 and if you build her properly. Gets her ultimate quickly depending on at least having like 3 airs on the team, which again, she's really just meant for these teams. And you can really do some like wacky, it really depends on your investment obviously. It enables you for more invested in accounts to do some like wacky off Crisis Air teams. Of course, it's not gonna ever be as good as running their proper teams and their respective teams that are not Crisis Airs, but since Crisis Airs can have all sorts of combination with these other DPSs that are not airs themselves, since Cypher can go on teams, Tribi, so on and so forth. Getting access to do those teams are honestly more of a fun side, so Cyrene not only has the presence of being really strong, having E2 fixes her problem, now you also get a unit that's significantly more fun to mess around with, which is something I value a lot. I value fun in this game. And so the fact that E2 fixes it really just turns her into this monstrous unit with Crisis Airs especially, even though she's way better than people put her out to be at E0/E0S1. E2S1, you really just feel it. I can't deny it. Regardless, at E2, she's just a completely different unit with the stuff you can do. Majority of the Crisis Air teams have ways where they work with each other, like Hyselines, you would run Hyselines, you can run Cypher with her. Sustain-wise, you can technically run Hyacine on there. You also have Danheng. Only one that wouldn't really go on the team as an air would be Kafka, and that's only one, so if you have E2 Cyrene, it doesn't really matter if you're only missing one. Anoxa teams can be full airs, Phynon teams can be full airs. Aglia is also another character that might have one off just because you'd almost want Sunday. So getting the initial extra stacks for having an air or remembrance, in this case it would be air, plus the E2 giving you 12 stacks, you just have no issue with the ultimate. You just go into it and now you get this broken buff where no other buff is really going to outdo that for those Crisis Airs. I do, however, wish her universal buff for characters that are not Crisis Airs would be better. Like, I know I mentioned it, like she's meant for these Crisis Air characters, but imagine the buffs are better. I'm not going to try to think of a better one because I might just make one that's super stupid, but imagine she just had better buffs for these characters so she had more synergy outside of airs. That could also just directly increase her longevity because maybe she'd work with a future character. Because honestly, Cyrene, once the Crisis Air stuff is just completely faded out, which is not going to be for a long time, honestly. Of course, as they fade, she fades, since that's where her main value lies, along with the Crisis Airs. But yeah, in E2, this unit is just an absolute unit. Really just it. So fun to see the numbers she can do, especially, and also just the fact that you get your ultimate so quickly and have these Crisis Airs start steamrolling. And then finally, my talk about my E6 Cyrene. I do have my gripes with her overall Eidolons, especially when you get the 6. Like, I wish that maybe one of them helped the Blooms and Plume shot. I already mentioned this in previous videos. I wish they helped that more as opposed to just Ode to Ego, because E4 really just focuses purely on Ode to Ego. E6, besides the team-wide action advance, only functions off Ode to Ego once you get 1 or 2 stacks. The first Ode to Ego, you're guaranteed practically right away. You just pop the all on 2 people right as you get it, and then boom, Ode to Ego, you get the first buff. The first buff is a 20% defense shred, so a debuff, I guess. They have 20% defense shred for every enemy for the rest of the battle. And then the second Ode to Ego shot is going to be in any shot after that, so whatever Ode to Ego is going to be a free DDD anytime it procs. So with E4 and E6, Ode to Ego is doing insane damage, but Blooms and Plumes still really isn't doing as much damage as I hoped it would, especially because our enhanced basic attack doesn't really do that much damage either. I do kind of wish they spread out the damage more across all of it, as opposed to just focusing on Ode to Ego. Like, I get the E6 works like that. Imagine having a dance that stands for every Blooms and Plume shot. That would just be a little too broken. But at least with the E6, you get the access to a first ult of Robin, giving everyone another turn opens some really wacky things, and it's so goddamn fun, dude. We know how long Robin has stayed relevant because of her relatively good buffs, but also mainly the team-wide action advance. Imagine Cyrene had a team-wide action advance alongside activating everyone's ult. Imagine that. Just try to imagine that. That's what E6 does. It's incredible. It's just incredibly stupid. So fun to mess around with it. And then when you have E6, of course, at that level, you can really just mess around with non-Crisis Air teams all around. Maybe just paired with just one, because again, Tribute Cypher is so universal. You've probably already seen some whack stuff I've done. But yeah, dude, that unit with E6, being able to really just run her on these whack teams is probably the most fun part. Like, with Crisis Airs, obviously her issue was solved with E2. With E4, her damage skyrockets, and then E6, you get a team-wide action advance, plus the base kit activating everyone's ult, so you just get to do some wacky stuff. The perma 20% defense shred right away after you activate ultimate after the first Ode to Eagle shot. Universally good on every single team, because defense shred is just universally good with any type of damage. So it's honestly good that they decided to do that, and then anytime you get it again, you get a DDD proc, which is great. Unfortunately, at the level of the investment of my account, you never really see Ode to Eagle twice in any game mode that is not Anomaly. Anomaly is the only actual mode I'll see Ode to Eagle more than once, because by the second one, they're pretty much dead. But yeah, running Cyrene on just such a bunch of whack teams like the Fei Xiao team, Adventure and Hyper Carry, the fact she can work on there and all that stuff, mainly because at least her base kit provides access to true damage, and then at E6, the team-wide action advance, universally great. It's just so fun, dude. It's so hard to describe how fun it is. So yeah, E4 really just gives big damage, E6 gives technically slightly bigger damage because of the defense shred, but that's good for everyone. The DDD proc, good to have there anytime it does proc again, but again, I don't really see that. Team-wide action advance though, absolutely insane. So yeah, that's kind of how I do feel about her dupes overall. So her E1 making her do more damage earlier on is great. Again, that's like one of the big problems she has in E0 in my opinion, besides the ult issue at times where it's just her damage isn't really up to par. Especially since her kit does focus a good amount of damage. So E1 unlocking that is good. Her E2 then fixing that real only issue with ult. If you don't get around it, now you just have no excuse with it. E4 makes Ode to Eagle just do stupid damage. E6, you know, you get all the effects that I've already talked about. Again, my real only complaint about her Eidolons is they don't focus on Blooms and Plume shot enough, and maybe even her enhanced basic attack. I really do wish they focused on that more, because you're going to be using enhanced basic attack a lot because she's built so fast. Blooms and Plume shot, you're going to see that a bunch, because anytime you're running her alongside a DPS that isn't constantly going to be needing the refresh, so like not a Noxa, where you constantly need to be giving him the buff. On a Remembrance team, you're gonna actually need to use it every time because they all have one-time buffs. Aglia technically as well, if you don't really need the energy, you don't need to buff her again, so you just constantly use the shot. Any other wacky combination with characters that have permanent time, one-time effects, Cypher, Cerebro, whatever. Yeah, you get the point. I just wish they focused more on that, so she could have been more well-rounded. Other than that, really fun unit. I'm really glad that she is as strong as she is at every level. Again, I already talked about my bit of gripes at E0. Talked about her at E1/2, and then the one that I have at E6. Don't regret going for E6, honestly. Just been such a fun unit to mess around with. I'm going to be using Crisis Airs for probably as long as... until I physically can't, really. I don't really see a world where I'm not using them. By the time I don't use them, maybe they'll even be buffed. I don't know. We'll see. I love my family, and I want them to stay with me as long as possible. Give me back my family, yo. Anyway, that is my final impressions of Cyrene. Again, you can tell I'm very satisfied. My real only problems, as I did mention, E0, the alt stuff when it is applicable, that is still just like a little bit of a problem, but there are workarounds. And if you don't care about zero cycles, then it's not a problem at all. And then her damage before E1 is just really lackluster. And then once you get further into dupes, I wish they focused her damage more than just Ode to Eagle. That's kind of it. Otherwise, very happy on this unit at every level of investment. Really fun unit. I'm going to continuously use her a lot. So if you guys did put for Cyrene, definitely comment down below how you're also feeling about her. Has she been a really fun unit for you as well? And if you did enjoy this video, dropping a like would be greatly appreciated. If you're new to the channel or haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn the bell icon for future videos like this, along with all other types of Star Wars content. Check the description to join the Discord and check out my Arknights channel. And once again, guys, if you are interested whatsoever in Raid Shadow Legends, be sure to click the link at the top of the description or pin comment and create your account to get a very strong start. Supports the channel as well, alongside giving you a really strong start, so a win-win. So again, if you're interested at all, definitely feel free to do so. Anyway, I'll see you later. It's like, I don't even know where my phone is, bro. It's like almost 3 AM. I wanna go to bed. Anyway, peace out.